There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 224, and today on the podcast, we're talking about the joys and challenges and lessons learned and hopes and dreams and fears of raising an outdoor kid. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by Onyx. And today in the show, before we do anything else, I want to read you a few reviews of the Wired to Hunt podcast. You ready for this, Dan?
Oh boy.
There are over 1,800 5-star reviews of this podcast, I'm proud to say. But we've got a couple doozies thrown in there too that I wanted to share. For example, quote, "Enough of the family talk. If I wanted to learn how to be a father, I'd listen to a different podcast." End quote. Or how about this one? Quote, "It would be 5 stars, but the obnoxious guy won't shut up about his kids. So annoying."
Oh man, this is just building my confidence.
These are just a few of the rave reviews that we've gotten about our parenting-related talks, Dan. So, since people are asking for it, I thought we'd double down on the family talk. Good idea, right?
Oh yeah, I can't wait till these people. They're so excited. Here's the Wired to Hunt podcast. It's on my phone. It's about freaking kids. Are you kidding me?
Oh no!
1-star review. Are those 1-star reviews?
I think they were 2-star reviews, those two.
We haven't done our job then yet, Mark.
Yeah, but thankfully, there's been actually a lot more positive feedback about these kinds of talks and our BS sessions where we kind of share our everyday life stories and struggles and whatnot. And for a long time, it was just you with the kids, but now I've got a little bundle of joy, and that's got me thinking about all this kind of stuff too. And especially most recently here, I've been out on this several-week excursion with my little boy out west. That's got me thinking more and more about introducing our kids to the outdoors and stuff like that. So I had this idea, Dan, and in a second here I'm going to bring in another friend of mine who's going to be able to join us to talk about this too. But I thought we could just talk about this whole idea of raising an outdoor kid and talking through our experiences so far, more so your experiences than mine since I'm really new into it. And then my friend Andy Bradley is going to join us. He has a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. And I think this is fair to say that all three of us want our kids to grow up, being exposed to the outdoors, hopefully having an interest in something like hunting or fishing or some of the other outdoor things we like to do. I know that's something that's definitely high on my list of hopes and dreams, is that Everett's going to be getting into that stuff. So I thought we could just kind of talk through all that kind of stuff, what we've been doing so far, what we've learned. Maybe if you or Andy have any other advice for me, since I've got the youngest. It's funny, I told my wife about this idea, And she said, well, I don't think that you guys are terribly qualified because like none of you have successfully converted a child to an official like adult hunter or anything like that. So she's like, you don't have much to stand by. But for whatever it's worth, we're going to share our perspectives, I guess, from where we are. So I'm 5.5 months in. How old's Ava now, Dan?
Ava's like 5.5.
5.5. All right. So you're 5.5 with 3 kids, and Andy's 9 years in with 2 kids. So we can talk about the young child experiences, and then you can come back to this podcast 10 years from now, and we will tell you about what it's like to have a teenage hunter, hopefully, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what I was thinking, Dan. Before we do all that, though, I do think we need to take a little bit of time for our pregame show like we usually do, but instead of a kid-related pregame show like so many of them are, do you have anything worth talking about that is non-kid related today?
Well, I guess I do, but I was hoping for some kind of grand announcement, like congratulations, Dan.
Am I allowed to do that? I don't know if you wanted to do it, but okay, if I can do it, then yes.
Yeah, you can do it.
This has been decades in the making, ladies and gentlemen. This man has come from the bottom to the top. He has grinded and worked and slaved over his computer and his laptop and his desk. He has Post-it notes strewn all over across his computer monitors, his desktop, his cubicle walls, everything to inspire him to be what he is now, which is one of the leaders in the hunting community in the whitetail space, as a communicator, as a podcaster. It is my privilege to announce to you that Dan Nine Fingers Johnson was named the 2018 Quality Deer Management Association Communicator of the Year. Congrats, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that.
Was that announcement up to par?
It is. It's up to par. And if you
I'm
did
so
that
proud
off
of
the
you,
top,
man.
If you did that announcement off the top of your head, that was really good, by the way.
That was all ad lib, man. Just came to me. But yeah,
that's almost just as impressive.
This is the first and only podcast in the world to be hosted by 2 Communicator of the Year.
There you
winners.
go. I'm just following in your footsteps, buddy.
Well, you're doing awesome stuff, man. So well deserved. It's been awesome to see what you're doing with Nine Finger Chronicles and the podcast and Sportsman's Nation and giving back to QDMA and 2% for conservation and all the things you're doing to make sure that giving back to the resource is top of mind. And that's something that I know we've talked a lot about here, but it's been just as a friend, kind of watching from afar. Without getting too cheesy, it's a proud friend, proud moment. So keep up the good work, man. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do have to say that I owe you a little bit of thanks as well, because I was in a spot when you started this podcast and when you said, "Hey, Dan, you want to be my co-host?" and I said, "Yes, let's do that." And then I was in kind of a low spot, not knowing if I ever wanted to do anything in the hunting media space anymore, just kind of sitting in a state of an idle state, I guess. And then when I started the podcast with you here as the co-host, I felt like I got some rejuvenation into it. So I owe, maybe you were the little snowball at the top that pushed down the mountain and turned into a big snowball, down the ways. But so I owe you a thanks as well, man.
Oh, hey, you are welcome. And if you could please refer to me from now on as the little snowball for the rest of our relationship, I'd appreciate that.
Oh, there's my little snowball, Mark Kenyon.
Rub the top of my head. Give me a hug. That's so cool, though, man. It's a bummer that you're not down there in New Orleans like we were last year. That would have been great if we could have been there for the announcement.
Yeah.
But we got Furter representing us down there. I wish, I don't know if, I guess this is coming out after that all happened. But I wish we could have had Furter go up on stage and accept the award for you. And
Lindsey Thomas Jr., he's the director of communications for the Quality Deer Management Association. And I asked him, is there anybody that I need to pick to go and accept the award on my behalf, and I wanted to have Furter go and do it with maybe like a cardboard cutout of me there.
That would have been perfect.
It happened all so fast, and I didn't find out until last week. And unfortunately, just with my schedule and the family, I wasn't able to make the trip down there, which sucks. But I'll rep the QDMA proud regardless.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Great organization, great people involved with it, and lucky we've got some people like you that are helping spread the good word and good stuff hopefully in the future. So that's exciting. Anything else? All my news as far as my life is just kid-related now. I've been out doing this Montana adventure, and we can talk about that once Andy joins us.
Well, here's what I want to talk to you about. So your wife posted a picture of you changing a car tire, and you guys were sitting there. It's like, but the thing about it was, here's a picture of you changing a car tire, but in the background was just this beautiful mountainscape, right? Just this gorgeous view. And it's like, freaking car tires, my day sucks, boo-hoo, look at me. And I'm just like, and as I'm sitting in this cubicle smelling the person behind me's like liver and onions for lunch, I just was like, I'd rather change a car tire there every day for the rest of my life than sit in this cubicle one more day.
Yeah, you're right. I can't complain too much, but I'm just the least handy person. I think I've mentioned this before. So even changing a car tire was a very intimidating proposition at the moment. And it was like we were just about to head out for the evening to go. We had plans for this nice night in Yellowstone National Park. We were going to go in there. We were going to have like a nice hike. I was going to go fish for a little bit. We were going to go get dinner in this place just outside of the park and drive through this valley and look at buffalo and all that kind of fun stuff. And then, yeah, we loaded up the car. We got Everett in the car seat. We were about to pull out, and I turned on the car, and then the low tire pressure gauge was flashing. I'm like, what? And I looked back there, and that back right tire was flat. But I had like a 30-second like meltdown where I just like put my head down and just stare at the ground for like 30 seconds, taking deep breaths, and then said, all right, you just need to fix it, go get the tire replaced, and we'll get back to the plan. And was able to do that, and the tire shop about 20 minutes away was able to they had to replace all my tires actually, which was a bummer. I totally blew out the one. These are crazy bad roads out here, and that just totally ruptured one.
Yeah. So
I had to get all new tires, but we got everything done in time to still get out for our evening plans. They were a little rushed, but we still got out. So it's these trips are always a little challenging just from you just don't know what's going to happen when you're on the road for so long, driving all over the place and pulling this tin can of a camper all over.
Yeah.
The awning ripped again earlier this week in a windstorm. I forgot to put the awning down when we went out to go look at some places and came back and the awning was ripped, so duct taped that. So kind of just par for the course now.
I don't know if we're going to talk about this in the upcoming podcast, but how has Emmett transitioned from being a stay-at-home baby to a baby on the go?
Everett is doing very good.
Emmett. Did I say Emmett?
You said Emmett, but it's Everett.
Oh, Everett. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I got a buddy's friend's name, Emmett.
That happens to the best of us, man. But he's doing really good, and I'll definitely share a whole bunch more about what that transition has been like. But knock on wood, so far we've been very lucky. So it looks like we've got a on the road baby, which has been cool. We sometimes just like kind of pinch ourselves, like how do we get so lucky that we have a kid that's like so adaptable to our kind of weird lifestyle. So we keep on like telling ourselves, all right, the next one we can't expect the next one to be like this. So
you shouldn't.
Yeah, we're just gonna enjoy this and prepare ourselves for more difficulties with the next one. But so far so good. So I guess now that we're on the kid topic, should we hit timeout really fast and get Andy in here and then just dive into this full steam?
Yep, this is a perfect transition.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll get Andy on the line. All right, before we do that, though, we need to take a quick break to thank our partners at Whitetail Properties. And today, our producer, Spencer Newharth, is checking in with a Whitetail Properties land specialist to talk about summer food plots.
This week with Whitetail Properties, we are joined by Tom James, a land specialist out of Indiana. And Tom has some advice for those who had intentions of putting in a food plot, but still haven't gotten around to it.
At this point in time, mid-July going forward, I would say the best plan would be to strategize and plan for an August planting. Here in the Midwest, by the time you get to mid-July, the only thing you see going in the ground is double crop, where a farmer will cut winter wheat off and go back in and drill soybeans, and they can do that successfully. As far as food plot guys go, we're just looking at a really droughty, hot, stressful time of the season. But you're only a month away from prime time fall planting dates, which is mid-August all the way through mid-September here in the Midwest. So my best advice for anybody would be just to go ahead and plan on mowing your field, getting the existing vegetation sprayed and burned down with Roundup, and maybe do a soil test, knowing what your soil amenities are going to need, but just be geared up and planning ahead for killing competitive vegetation, have your seed selections done, and ready to rock and roll in about 3 or 4 weeks.
If you'd like to learn more and to see the properties that Tom currently has listed for sale, visit whitetailproperties.com/James. That's JAMES.
All right, so we're back, and with us is my buddy Andy Bradley. You've been on the podcast before, I think, on one of our shed hunting episodes, right? Didn't you?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So,
was it not last year, the year before?
Yeah, Iowa Shed Camp. I think you showed up just after Dan had to leave to do kid stuff. Isn't that right, Dan? I think you had to leave early.
I had a window to shed hunt. I shed hunted in that window, and then I made it back before that window closed.
So this perfectly ties into the topic of discussion then. And just before we pulled you in, Andy, we were just talking a little bit about, how I've been out here with Everett and the family trying to do some camping and hiking with him. And I figured you'd be a good guy to add to this, though, as we talk about this whole idea of raising an outdoor kid, because of all my friends that have children, I've always kind of looked at you and Becca as having really done a good job raising your boys and doing neat things with them outdoors. I've loved seeing all the different things you've done with the boys. So I kind of want to start with you, Andy. I'm just kind of curious, what was it like when you began? When the boys were really young. I mean, how did you begin this, or what was your thought process? Because for me right now, I'm so eager and I so badly want Everett to be into the outdoors and like these things I'm so passionate about. I find myself having to try to temper my expectations because I'm already finding myself already thinking, oh well, I gotta do this. What was it like for you when the boys were younger? Because they're 7 and 9, right? Levi and Lukey, isn't that right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So what was your mindset early on?
I mean, identical to what you're describing. I think it's just one of those things where you like it too much, I think, and you just want them to enjoy it like you do. And that was the hardest thing for me, is when they're not old enough to kind of understand how awesome some of these things are, to try to kind of pitch it to them at their speed, because I want to show them, look how cool that is. And they're looking at a turkey that's 75 yards away, and they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. But when you slow it down and figure out what's, a crayfish is cool when they're little, not a turkey that's 75. Look how big his beard is. I don't care, Dad. Take me back fishing,
Yeah.
So that was kind of my experience. It's the same thing. You want to, your mind just races for all these things that, I can't wait to do this, do this, do this. And then you realize that the things that kind of get you going right now it's going to take a while for that to be what gets them going. So that was kind of my first experience, kind of that had to temper it as well. So
yeah. Do you feel like you fall in the same boat, Dan, as far as I think in our past conversations you've kind of shared some of the thoughts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just excited, when my daughter was born, she was the first kid I had. And even in the hospital, the couple nights that we were there, I was talking to my wife, Sarah, and I was just like, hey man, I can't wait to get her in a tree stand with me. I can't wait to take her shed hunting with me. I can't wait to do all these things with me. And next thing you know, it's just you realize that is at a much slower pace.
Right.
For them, you could go out and do it, but to take them and to get them to enjoy it without burning them out is at a much slower pace.
Yeah. Do you guys ever have any worry about what if they don't like any of this stuff? Is that something you have ever thought about? What if, 10 years, 15 years down the road, they have no interest in this kind of stuff?
Man, and that's why I think not pushing it on them is so important. If you want to share with them your passion. I guess you have to be able to share with them what their interests are. And that may not be hunting all the time. So for me, like, I have to take, like, I kind of really liked baseball growing up, and my dad was all about baseball and sports and stuff. And it kind of burnt me out a little bit, turned me off. And so I kind of pulled away from baseball, and I don't want that to happen with my kids from a outdoor standpoint. So I'm basically baby stepping, like check this bug out and then play it up like this bug is the greatest thing ever, or go out in the backyard recently and we're catching fireflies and digging in the dirt and just getting dirty and getting used to being outside where all this nature happens. I think that's kind of the path I'm going to take.
Yeah. What about you, Andy?
Yeah. Well, definitely, I think scared is like the first notion I had is like, what if they don't like this stuff that I just want them to? And sometimes I describe this stuff to my wife, and Mark knows this. Like, we start planning on going somewhere on some trip or something, and I start talking. My wife doesn't even want me to start planning it until about a month before we go, because she doesn't want to listen to all my plans and all my ideas. So, so it's kind of, with them, I was so scared that, like, what if they don't like it? And now it's kind of after you have, and not like my kids are almost, one of them's 10 almost and 7. So it's at the point now where I'm not scared that they're not going to like it. I'm more like, it's almost like I'm going to be sad if they don't enjoy it like I do, because it's such an enjoyable, everything about it, from fishing to hunting, whatever it is, it's so much fun. And I just hope, because I know a lot of people that they don't have that in their life, and I'm just, oh man, I hope they enjoy it like I do, for their sake. It used to be like, I was afraid I'm not going to be able to take them, but now it's like, oh, for their own sake, I hope that they love this, or at least something. But I'm with Dan on that one for sure, that you realize that you really got to, slow it down and just let them love it at their own pace. Because same thing with sports, I was that kid that was begging their dad to go outside and play baseball, and I think I burned my dad out, but that's a whole other story.
So what kind of stuff? Because I'm obviously very early still. He's 5.5 months old, well, pushing 6 months old, I guess, almost. Next week he'll be 6. And what kind of stuff, you kind of alluded to a little bit, Dan, but what were like the earliest things you guys were doing to kind of like try to introduce the kids to it? I mean, Andy, what were the things that you were kind of first starting out with to kind of, get them introduced to this whole world?
Well, we've always had all kinds of dogs, so that was the first thing that they were exposed to. Is we had coon dogs and bird dogs and all kinds of, and they would be down there and they'd always want to go check those out. But I think that was just something that they always wanted to be around. But as it went by, the time went by a little bit, I think fishing was probably the first thing. My parents live on the Kalamazoo River, so we can go down there and, I can distinctly remember one of them sitting in the car seat, and it was kind of a half joke, but putting a fishing rod in his lap in the car seat when we were sitting on the edge of the river. Just part of that was 50% for the kid and 50% for me, just so I could see it done. But so I think the water is probably the first thing that really, because I don't know what it is about the water, but it just draws them to it. So probably that.
I feel like you've kind of done the same thing, Dan, would you say? Because I've seen you guys taking the kids out a lot fishing. Yeah.
And I think it's what's easy first, right? Being quiet in a turkey blind or in a tree stand is not easy to do, right? So anything where they can be loud and they can show their excitement. And when they're young, like my son is 3 now and my daughter's 5, and just like their dad, they're both loud, and and so they get excited when they see like a water bug or the bobber goes under the water. They scream, and that you have to capitalize on that. I feel you can't tell them, hey, be quiet. You gotta, oh, that's awesome, good job, all that stuff, and get them excited about the little things. And then I think as those little things get, just as even this time of year, example, 2 years ago is when I started taking my daughter with me on these nighttime drives looking for deer out in the fields.
Yeah.
hand them the binoculars. It's not about you looking at the deer. It's about them holding it, even if they're looking at the wrong way. And you have these pretend conversations with them, right? Like, hey, what do you see? Oh, Dad, that's a big buck, Dad. It's not a buck. It's not a buck at all. It's probably a dog or a piece of wood out in the field. But they're excited about it, and that's what you have to capitalize on, I feel.
Yeah, I've got a niece, or several nieces, 3 nieces now, who all, whenever they come to my house, they want to look at the deer mounts or look at the shed antlers, or I've got binoculars on my back window where, we're always looking at the fields behind the house, same thing. And they always put the binoculars the wrong way and look through the big holes.
They always do that. Why is that?
I don't
Mine
know.
still do.
They can't see anything.
I like it this way better.
But just like you said, Dan, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I see it."
Imagination.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I agree. It's like, and I guess I have got a little bit of training with my nieces, because it's been neat to see them from little itty bitties to now the oldest is, I don't know, 7 or 8, and getting to introduce them to just what I do, and talking about, like, when we eat venison, when they come visit, talk about that, and tell them the stories about all the different, things I'm doing, how we got this, what this deer, where this deer was, and pointing out this one. And or like back during the hunting season, sometimes like we would babysit them, and Dan, how often I would have my wife come pick me up on that one property, drive the truck through the cornfield. So sometimes she would bring all the nieces with her, so they'd be all piled in the truck, and then come driving this truck into the cornfield. And then I'd come sneaking up to the truck to hop in the back, and then Kylie opened the window, and all 3 girls started screaming at the top of their lungs. They're like, "Hi, Mark!" I'm like, "No, quiet. Holyfield's here." But yeah, like that kind of stuff. I can see how just introducing them in those kinds of ways makes a big difference, and is a lot of fun. But I want to talk more about fishing. Give me some more advice from both of you guys as far as like introducing kids to fishing, because that's going to be top of my mind. And I'm already thinking I probably want to just introduce Everett to fishing by going on like a 7-day float trip, fly fishing.
Yeah,
right. That's the right way to do it.
I
Right?
think that's
Overnight
like
backcountry.
something a little more hardcore, maybe like you could parachute in or something. I think that would be.
Maybe the Yukon River, going through Alaska. I mean, if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you don't want them to be a wuss. Come on.
Exactly. In all seriousness, though, someday, Andy, how cool would it be to take our boys back on that float trip that we did in Montana last summer?
Oh man.
Right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
I've thought about that ever since we went, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dan,
Thought
remember
about taking them and going. Oh man, dude, that's the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remember when I did that pack rafting trip last summer, Dan? That was with Andy.
Gotcha.
And that would be, I mean, if the kids did learn how to fly fish, that would be an amazing place to take them, because there were just so many fish and they were so eager to feed. But that's a long ways down the road for me, at least. But
Yes.
yes,
Fly fishing is a long ways down the road.
Yeah. Okay, but back to the beginning though. Give me a talk. How did you end up getting the boys into fishing, Andy? Any lessons learned there, or what was the story?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to go a direction you weren't thinking. Ice fishing. That's it. It's the easiest thing. And I know that's what you're going to say. No flies and there's no Orvis or nothing, but I'm telling you, sit them on a bucket with that flasher in front of them, and they are hooked. My kids have 0 video games, so the closest thing to a video game they have is my Vexilar that flashes in front of them. We're ice fishing in a shanty. So that was how my kids got hooked, because it's that easy. You can find them in shallow water, and they're sitting right over top of them, and they're there, but you aren't going to fish probably for at least the first 3 years when you're taking them, because they're not real equipped to take all those responsibilities on. They require a lot of help.
Well, yeah, and like, how do you manage just the elements? I mean, you bring them in the shanty, bundle them up with 1,000 layers, and just let them play?
Well, that's what just like Dan was saying a little bit earlier, they're not, I was really hardcore. I feel like I was when I was a kid, and I feel like I was into it, but I was probably just exactly like my oldest son, probably. As time goes by, I'm starting to realize that I probably was just like him. But a lot of the time, they're just playing. Like we'll be bundled up. We take the shanty. I set the shanty up. I set their rods up. I don't even set one up for myself, because I'm not capable of working mine and helping them. So I just sit between them, and they catch a few fish, and after an hour, if they're not biting really good, they're ready to. And then next thing you know, they're outside the shanty. I can hear them wrestling, and whatever two brothers do, they're fighting and doing whatever they do. But that's the hardest part, is to just. And I don't have. Mark knows this. I'm not the stand and watch kind of guy. I'm more of a hands-on. Let's do this. Let's do. And I have to just take a step back, because they want to do what they want to do, and I feel like. And I've always tried to describe like how they get to know, and anything that we do, I try to make it as organic as possible. I don't try to push them and make them and force them. I just let them do what they want to do. And if sometimes when we're fishing, an hour of it's fishing or less, and the other 2 hours they're out chasing each other and throwing snowballs, I guess that, they're having fun. I feel like that's a memory that they can have when they get older. It's a good experience. And I hope, hopefully that translates to them wanting to do it more as they get older and they're more focused on it. And you know what though, when you have kids, you realize that as long as you have them, if they want to throw snowballs, go fishing and throw snowballs the whole time, as long as they want to go, you'll be happy for them to do that,
Yeah. What has the evolution been? Have you seen since you started doing that with them, are they, have they picked it up the way you hoped they would? Do they want to go ice fishing or fishing on the lake and stuff now? Are they getting more into the actual fishing part of it? Like, have you seen that grow at all, or what's that look like?
It kind of comes and goes, man. It really wavers. Some days they're into it and they want to do it for hours, and other days they just want to goof off. And I don't know, I don't know if it's definitely progressed now. Like, I can, at the point where Levi, we actually went fishing yesterday, and he's got his own open face. He doesn't have the Zebco 202 anymore. He's got an open face and cast it, and all that jazz. He can take the fish off the hook. He can do anything that he needs to do, put the bait on. But it definitely has progressed. But there's times where you're like, I want him to just fish, but sometimes he just wants to goof off. He was fascinated yesterday after we fished and didn't do very well. He pulled a lily pad up, and it was about 12 feet long. The stalk of it was, and that was a fascination we had to talk about for 15 or 20 minutes. But it's still a blast. But back to what you were saying, yeah, I definitely think they've progressed, but I don't want to push them, but I think they have progressed.
Yeah. Do you think that is either one of them more into it than the other, Luke versus Levi, or are they both kind of in the same place?
They both have their own little niches where they kind of fit in. So Lukey is the youngest one, and he's the baby, so that's why he's Lukey. But he's like, we call him the sloth. Okay, so his mentality is totally different. Levi is a hummingbird, and Lukey's a sloth. So when we have different activities, that one of them. So trapping is Lukey's thing. He absolutely loves it, and it's perfect because he's methodical in everything he does in his life. He's slow. He just takes his time, and I've learned that from him. I take him. It's like there's no reason to hurry. Just take your time, and he loves trapping. And Levi, not so much. It's not action-packed enough, I don't think. It doesn't, really get him charged up. And Levi wants to fish and do things like that. And Luke loves sitting in a tree stand. Levi, not so much. He wants to play on my phone if we sit in a deer blind for too long. And it's like, so I think they, definitely have to navigate different, paths for each one of them, because they have different interests and different, different things that they like, I guess.
Yeah. That's got to be so cool to see those different unique interests grow, though.
It's wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. What about you, Dan? What are you seeing from the kids so far as their interest in this stuff? I'm sure Knox is really the big outdoorsman already, but what about the older two?
No, it's cool to see this because, see, Ava's 5 now. So when she was 2, we would go fishing for bluegills, and she would basically just be sitting on my lap, and she would maybe hold the pole and reel in. To last summer, she would, she was 4, and she could start reeling the fish in when the bobber would go underwater. And now this year, oh my God, the last time we went fishing, she did not want to leave. And I was pretty pumped about that. I mean, she is putting the worm on the hook. She is casting. She's reeling it in when it goes under. She can't take the fish off by herself quite yet, but she is gun-ho about fishing. And it's just been the thing that I've been doing is letting her do all of this at her own speed, because she would want to reel. Like 3 years ago, she would want to reel, or 2 years ago, she just reel the whole time and reel and reel and reel. And it's not even enough time for the worm to sink yet. And I'm just like, no, sweetie, don't do that. You can't do that. You got to let it sit. And then she would go and she wouldn't want to do it anymore. So then when we would go fishing, I didn't care if the bobber went under one time. I just let her reel in every time. Did you get one? No, I didn't get one, Dad. Okay. Well, maybe just try letting the bobber sit there for a little bit. Okay, I'll try it, Dad. And then she would realize that you have to let it sit there for just a second, and then it would go over. And I think what really got her hooked was the being able to just play around with some of this stuff, like the worms, hold the worms in her hand and just play around and look at them and get dirty. And being in some clear water. We have a pond that we fish, and it's crystal clear water, and you can see the fish swim up to the worm and pull the bobber under. And the kids get a really big kick out of that. So that's how.
Is it?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask Dan, the milestone. This is a huge milestone in our house. The hook set.
Yeah.
And that happened. It was like when people potty train. Like he sets the hook. I call my wife. Like he sets the hook now. It's like you don't have to. He catches his own fish when he set the hook. It was his own fish. The things you get proud of when you have kids.
That's
it's
right.
Pretty boring to some people, but
we had to have a talk about that because my wife's dad is a huge angler, huge bass fisherman. And when he sets the hook, it's almost like he's trying to rip a manhole cover off of a street, just like, and he rips, like the term ripping lips literally happens, when you reel in, it's just the lips of a fish on a hook because he's setting the hook so hard. So my daughter is trying to mimic him, and she's just ripping it and almost throws the pole. She'll fall over. So I'm like, sweetie, you don't have to do what Grandpa does. Just reel in the pole. You're going to be fine.
Now, what about Mac? What's his interest on the fishing side? Is he getting it yet? I saw that he was like watching I think it was your father-in-law cleaning fish the other day.
Yep.
Is he getting into it?
He's kind of on the same pace. I would say just a little bit behind. He doesn't like to touch the fish or touch the worms as much as Ava did, but he caught his. I'm going to say he caught it. His first fish. My father-in-law threw the bobber out. Bluegill took it under, and then he kind of helped reel it into the shore, and then he got his picture taken with it, and he was pretty pumped about that. But he was this last fishing trip was kind of a milestone because he used to be afraid of worms and touching the fish and stuff like that. But now when sister would catch a fish and she needed a new worm for her hook, he would get the worm for her. So they had kind of a system worked out. I'll get you the worm, you catch the fish, and then I'll get you another worm when it's ready. So whatever he wanted to do, whether it was just reel like she did a couple years ago, it's like he's 2 years behind where she's at, and he's 3. So, it's always, and I don't know about you, Andy, but when you had your first boy, like having a boy, it's like if my daughter didn't want to go hunting or fishing, there's a part of me that's just like, oh well. But when it's like you have these expectations for my son, and maybe you do too, Mark, with your first child being a boy, where it's like, okay, he's a boy, he's gonna hunt, he's gonna fish, he's gonna do all these things, and hell, he may be into designing clothes.
He might. Yeah, that's
being Mark's kid. It's a very good chance you might be into that.
There's the real Andy.
Sorry, Mark. I know it's usually not recorded, but I'm insulting you usually. So
no, please let it rip.
It's natural.
It's on the record now.
But yeah, I'm sure you probably felt the same way too, Andy, didn't you?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's a wild ride for sure.
What about the you mentioned trapping, that Lukey's really been into that. How'd you go about that? What's the process introducing them to that whole deal?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's certain personalities, but I think that's one of the first things that I can remember doing with my dad. And it's something, I mean, there's a million different things you can try to trap. I mean, different ways, water, different things. And how I would describe, just from my point of view, trapping, my dad told me when I was a kid, he said, when we're trapping, we trap muskrats and mink and all different kinds of stuff, but it's like Christmas morning. He said, you go up there and it's like every time you unwrapped a present Christmas morning. And it was like that to me. Like, it didn't start out that way, but with my younger son, he loves it. I mean, when we go check traps, I mean, you got to check them every day. And there were some traps that I would check, and these are things that I didn't know I'd have to do until I had kids. Some of them are kind of a pain in the butt to check. So I would check all those in the morning at 4:30 in the morning before work. But if I had like grounding sets or things like that, or conibears that could be checked in the afternoon, I would save all those traps, and I would find myself actually setting traps that maybe weren't real high likelihood of catching something, but if they were, it would be in areas where I could use conibears or different things, so I could come back and check them with the kids. And there was many times where I would catch stuff in the morning, and then I wouldn't mess with it. I'd just go to work and come back. And obviously these animals are dead, so it's not like they were suffering or anything like that all day. But I would come back in the afternoon, play dumb. We'd come driving up, and I'd let him get in front of me, and he'd run up, and those kind of things like that. I mean, that he lives for it. Coon trapping and mink is the funnest. I think he likes that the best because they leave little sign in the mud and different things like that, or in the snow if it's snow on the ground. So there's a lot of clues to look for, and even if there's not a lot of clues, like you were saying, Dan, you can talk about the bug being the coolest thing in the world. You can turn it into fun no matter what. You can find something that, look at these tracks over here. What do you think this is? And it's to the point now where, like, my little boys are the little sponges of information. Like, what do you think that is? And that's a raccoon trap for sure. You can see different things, his feet look like this, and if it was a possum, it would have this. So I think trapping is a really good one for them to, see the wild world like I do, I guess.
Yeah. I know nothing about trapping, so I'm leaning on you here, Andy. You mentioned a few things that stood out to me, like just the way that you're setting some traps now, not necessarily for their effectiveness, but more so for like the ability to get there with the kids and that kind of stuff. Is there anything else that you've learned that's helped you as far as, like, if someone else was listening and they want to introduce their kids to trapping? Any other things that you kind of picked up along the way that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, trapping's one of those things. Everything is now. There's an unlimited resource on the internet for you can click on YouTube and watch one after another, different methods people are doing to catch, different things. But muskrat traps, man, if you've got muskrats, and then granted they're not worth a whole lot of money, but they might be the kind of thing that gets your kid hooked on the outdoors for the rest of his life. So they're worth something, that way. But you can trap muskrats on a little pond. Almost every little pond you could ever find has them, and you can trap them with a 110 conibear. There's no, even if it's somebody that's never trapped before, you can't really screw up a conibear. If the conibear goes off, something's in it, a muskrat's in it, he's dead. So, and those are, just stuff like that. You got to not be afraid to just go do it, I guess, just go do it and try it, and get on YouTube if you have to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Books, obviously, but.
This brings up another thing, that as hunters too, I think you've probably had this already happen, Dan. I'm sure you have, Andy, but I know it's like, I imagine it would be an interesting thing when you first introduce the child to a dead animal, like how they process that, what that means. What was that like for you, Andy? Whether was that with trapping, was that with the deer hunting? How have you approached all that?
Well, there's one that kind of stands out in my mind, and I kind of have a picture of that same day that kind of reminds me of it every time I see it. But I think Levi was probably, our oldest was probably, he was probably 2.5 maybe. And I had killed a deer, shot a deer behind the house. There's a little bit of snow on the ground. And I took him out there with me. So he's like I mean, he's less than 2 feet tall. He's this little, I got him all bundled up, and it's cold out, and I'd already know the deer's down. It's kind of similar to the trapping, setting it up for him. The deer's down, and I actually drug it to this little 2-track that I could drive to, and I hadn't gutted the deer yet. So I come back to the house, and I bundle him all up, and I go, the whole song and dance. I shot a deer, and I don't know if we're going to be able to find it, and this and that. And he's just like 3 years old. He's talking, blabbing, he wants to go. And so we get him all dressed up, and he goes out there with me, and we quote unquote find the deer, and he's really excited, man. He's just like, and I don't know if that was the first experience you've had with something that was dead, but I can distinctly remember he was watching, and I say, all right, I'm going to gut it. I'm going to gut this deer, and now we're going to field dress it. And so he's like, okay, yeah. And he's just kind of watching there. And I start to field dress the deer, and I open this doe up, and I hear him say, oh, I'm getting back in the truck, Dad. As soon as he saw it, like he wasn't quite ready for that yet. And he wasn't freaked out, and there's been no lingering effects of that trauma that I put him through. But he's standing there, he's just this little baby standing there all bundled up. Well, I'm getting back in the truck, Dad. And he goes back to the truck, and he can't open the door. So I let him back in the truck. And I go back out there, and I'm like, that's one of those moments where it just goes through your mind, and you're like, man, am I going to regret that later? I don't. But there was no ill effects. He's fine. But we have like a hobby farm kind of a thing going on at our house too. So that kind of helps. I think it's important that kids get to see, where food comes from. So, and that's something I've always been very much, I wanted to make that very available to them to see, a lot of people, and talk about that with them, that a lot of people, like that guy on that sign right there, smiling, eating that hamburger, and people don't like hunting, but they don't mind people eating hamburgers. It doesn't make sense that people, and just that whole song and dance that you've heard a million times, that, that animal lives a free life. It lives the life that it was intended until maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds of whatever it is we're eating has anything to do with a human while it's alive. And that cow, its entire existence stood there, not that I'm against farming, because I don't want to sound like I am at all, but we make it very clear. My wife's very on board with it too, that death is part of life. That's everything's going to die, and we're taking advantage of the resources that we can get our hands on, and it's not anything that we don't take serious, but at the same time, it's been all positive. I think I don't think I can think of at the time that Lukey was exposed the first time to something dead. Like I said, we've always got pigs that are getting ready. I mean, they nicknamed their pigs. You know how kids will name their pigs, that we had pigs and they're not 4-H pigs or show pigs or any of that. They're just going to be going in the freezer, and we talk about it the entire time. And they're probably 4, maybe 4 and 3, maybe 3 and 5 when they first had one. They named their pigs Bacon and Sausage. So they kind of have a grip on it at this point. I mean, I wouldn't want to insult anybody, but my 5 and 7 or 7 and 9-year-olds have a better grip on where their food comes from than a lot of people. So, I think it can be a really good lesson for the rest of your life about, your relationship with food too. So no, I'm blabbing on now, but it's, I don't have any real bad stories for, hopefully.
Do you think the key though to having them so comfortable with that was then just the fact that you had them exposed to it early and often, and then that you kind of just explained it as you went? Would you say that's kind of what's been like the key to that success, do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because we've had they've had a lot of experience. We do process a lot of, wild game in here, and they're into that. Like the idea of getting our own food and things like that is they like that idea. Like eating fish, that would be the first thing that, like, I don't know what it is about fish, but nobody's like, oh, that poor fish when you're cleaning the fish for some reason. And
right.
Whenever something has fur, people tend to do that. But I mean, my kids, and like I said, me and Dan we were talking about no pressure on them at all, but Luke will help me clean. Like when we're skinning, for instance, we had a couple mink that we caught one day, and we went down to the basement, and it was bedtime. And this is something my wife we were talking about yesterday. At our house, there's no, and Mark knows this, bedtime is kind of fluid with the Bradleys.
I think everything's kind of fluid with the Bradleys. But
yeah, pretty much.
Sorry, continue.
But no, if they're doing something that we, in our minds, deem like productive, they don't have to go to bed, or they don't have to take a nap, or it doesn't have to be dinner time. For like, if we're working on something outside, if we're messing with the pigs, or if I'm skinning a deer, or if I'm tracking a deer, or anything like that, if they're just playing outside, if that's what it is, they don't have to come in to go to bed if they're outside enjoying it outside. Now, if they're inside watching TV, like if they want to watch TV, they ask, and sometimes we let them. If it's 8 o'clock, it's like, all right, it's bedtime. And like, we'll go outside. And like, they know that at this point, but even with like skinning the mink in the basement downstairs, if Luke wants to do that, when I had a bunch of stuff that I wanted to skin, and I started working on it, and Becca's real good about it. She doesn't have a problem with them coming down there, and if they want to stay down there, and if they're engaged in whatever's going on, now if they just want to play in the basement, off in the other room, it's time for bed, guys. But if they're engaged in there and something, that they can be learning about, we just let it roll and let them continue to do that until they lose interest in it. And when they're ready to go be done, hopefully. And that particular night I skinned, I don't know, I think 2 mink and I don't know, a couple coons or something. And he was down there the whole time. He was helping, he was hanging on to this and hanging on to that, and it took me 3 times as long to skin them all because he wanted to help. But, that's something that we try to do, is make sure that we don't, hamper their interest in something by something silly like bedtime, right?
Yeah, something arbitrary. It's funny. That's such a good point. That's something that my parents did. My dad, especially with me, that I think really helped me get into the things that I'm into. He always, later in years, he would always say, well, I always just knew I had to feed the habit, always feed the habit. So if ever I was showing any interest in like hunting or fishing in the outdoors, he would, he would always help feed that habit. So like you said, he would never stop me. He would never, if I wanted to go out for the weekend to go hunting, he would, he'd put aside things because that was always something he'd prioritize. Or if he was going to spoil me with something, it was going to be hunting gear or fishing gear. Like he was really tough in a lot of ways, but when it came to like a new fishing pole or something like that, he's like, well, I'll feed the habit for this one special thing. Right. And I think, that was something, whatever it was, helped encourage it. I think. Yeah, and it certainly worked. He fed the habit to what's now an obsession across the board for me. So yeah, that was a tip I've kept with me. Dan, what about you? Back to what I originally asked Andy about, though, when it comes to introducing them or exposing them to, to death, a dead animal, something like that. What's that been like for you and the kids?
Yeah, so I'm pretty blunt with them right at the beginning. I mean, I tell them that if you're eating meat, an animal dies. Fly, like a spider will eat a fly, a snake will eat a frog or a mouse, and we will eat a deer. And I've kind of compared what we do with other things in nature, right? So, and then this past turkey season was a perfect example. I shot my turkey. There was blood involved, and I took the turkey back home, and I was, cleaning the meat off of it and whatnot. And my daughter was sitting there and kind of watching me do it. And instead of just like doing it, I kind of explained to her, and I showed her, hey, look at this. We're going to turn this into turkey nuggets, or we're going to turn this into something, or hey, we're going to make fish sticks out of this fish or something. And then she relates it to food, and that way when we do have supper or eat that meat, then she can have a conversation with me. She's like, oh, Dad, you shot this buck, didn't you? Now we're going to eat it. Yeah. Oh, hey, Dad, is this the fish that I caught? Yes, it is. It is the fish that you caught, and so that you can have those conversations. But man, I followed a blood trail with her before. My stepdad shot a deer a while back. It was not this season, but the last season. And I had her, we kind of walked through the timber, followed the blood, and talked to her about how, sometimes it's best to be really detailed about it. That way it's almost like it goes over their head a little bit, but they're engaged with you still. Like, yeah, he put that arrow right through the vitals, and loss of blood's gonna stop it, and all this stuff. And they look at you a little confused, but they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's cool, yeah. Even though they don't really understand. Then we found the buck. There's blood in it, and she's like, Dad, is that buck dead? Yeah, it's dead. Grandpa shot it. Okay, now what are we gonna do? I'm like, well, do you want to sit here and watch us? We have to take its guts out because we got to take the guts out so it doesn't ruin the meat. Well, Dad, I don't want to watch that. okay, you don't have to.
Yeah.
We'll go with
Right.
grandma. Don't force them to do anything really that they don't want to do, because that day was great for her, but maybe taking the guts out would have been too much. So let's just that bridge will be crossed another time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about the actual hunting part of things? I know that you haven't taken Ava out to sit yet, right, Dan?
Nope, just fishing thus
Yeah,
far,
she's
and
fished.
shed hunting.
She found her first shed this spring. That was pretty cool. But Andy, you've been getting the boys out now with all sorts of stuff. How did that begin? What was their first hunt? How has that evolution kind of looked?
I think I got to think about that a little bit, but I'm thinking that it was probably in a pop-up line. I used to have a food plot that I had planted just for that reason. Like, I would spend hours and hours on it, and the chances of seeing a buck in it were very slim. But I did it just for that reason. And I actually I've yet to kill a deer with them with me yet. But last couple years, I've kind of transitioned away from the compound bow and back to the recurve, which I shot in the past. But it kind of opens up the parameters for me and what I feel comfortable shooting. And so now last year I took them a few times, and I have a couple tree stands set up for them to get into. And that's it, man. That's obviously not where I started, but that's where I'm at right now. And it is something else. Like, I can't wait till the day that it happened. Last year I had a really close encounter with a buck that was probably not, wouldn't be a shooter for most people, but when you got your 5-year-old, 6-year-old with you, and it would be Lukey was with me, and it was 5 yards away, and I had my recurve, and I'm like, I'm going to shoot this buck. And it just turned and ran away. And I was like, I'd never been so bummed that a deer, blew me up ever. I was just like, and it was probably a 2-year-old, it was a small deer, but it was one of those things, I just can't explain how much fun, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like someday when they're shooting deer or turkeys or whatever they're doing. But that would be, I would have to say probably the pop-up blind is the transition, how I got him into hunting.
What was Lukey's reaction to that close call last year?
Man, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. They have and the way he is, he's so, his brother's very cerebral and asks 1 million questions. And then Lukey just looks at you, and he's kind of squints his eyes, and he's just thinking. It's all his questions, it's almost like he's answering himself. I don't know what's going on in there, but he just looked at me, and he's just like, that deer was close, Dad. And I'm like, oh, it was 5 yards away. I'm like, yeah, buddy, it was close. He's like, were you going to shoot it? And he was sitting there just still as a stone, and nobody moved. I don't know if the wind swirled or, who knows. The place that I hunt's got a lot of human activity. No hunters, but a lot of people, they like to take walks with their Shih Tzus and stuff, which, it is what it is. And it might have been something like that ran him off. But I mean, it was really cool just to see his reaction. And I could, I hugged him after the deer ran off. I'm like, what do you think of that? And when I hugged him, I could feel his little heart beating fast. I was like, oh my gosh. And I wanted to just tear up right then. I'm like, I don't know. I think he gets it. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but I think he might get it, So it's pretty amazing, man.
Do they have the itch now from the hunt? Do they get excited about wanting to sit out there with you when it comes to deer or turkeys or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. I remember I was listening to I don't know if it was, I think it might have been the Meat Eater that you were on. They were talking about, Steve was talking about his kids and how when he was a kid, that his dad, it was laughable to think that you weren't welcomed to go whenever his dad was hunting. And I've kind of thought that's a good way to do it. And I'm kind of trying to, as time's gone by now, I'm thinking that's the way I have to do it. Anytime that I'm going to go do anything outdoors, I'm never going to, and there's been times when I said, no, buddy, you can't go today because it's too cold, or it's too this, or it's too that, or, I feel like I got a good shot at a buck that I got on a trail camera or something. And I've kind of put all that and basically scrapped all of that. Now it's just, if they want to go, I don't care what it is, we're going. And scent control is kind of out the window too with two boys. But one thing I don't do is I don't take them both at the same time. Because I feel like it's easier for them to not get distracted by each other and things like that. And I prefer to, try to keep it one-on-one. That way I can make sure I'm doing the right things too,
Yeah. So your philosophy that they're never not invited on a hunting trip, does that mean that one of your kids might show up at our Boundary Waters backcountry whitetail hunt in Minnesota?
Well, not quite.
Is that going to be a surprise
As
for me?
You know, that the first thing that in our household, you witnessed this, the very first thing that our kids learned in their life is that the word no. They learned that very quick around here, and that's how we do it. So I can say no, and there are times that I have to, and that might be one, but I guess I'll tell them no this time. I guess you don't want my kids coming, I guess. So fine.
No, I just think that based on my history with canoes, it wouldn't be safe for them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What am I getting myself into with that one? That's for another day, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, hey, Mark, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Right. So we talked a little bit earlier about how, like, what was going through my mind and how I was going to have to adapt to my children kind of living this lifestyle. And you, this year is a huge change for you. You know, you went out west, you're doing all this outdoor activity, but now you have how old is he? 6 months old?
Just about. Yep.
Okay. So now you're bringing a 6-month-old with you. So how has your outdoor life kind of changed with the addition of a 6-month-old?
Yeah. You know, it's one of those things I definitely had like a lot of apprehension about, like even before having kids. It was, how will kids impact all the stuff that we want to do and all these plans I have? So I kind of selfishly was like thinking about that a lot. But then once we had Everett, you know, my wife and I were both kind of on the same page that we never believed that we had to change our lifestyle to accommodate.
No,
like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, like we never felt like there's some people you see that they have a kid and they never leave the house again, and like it's always like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, it's too hard. And we had so many people telling us that kind of stuff, like, oh, you'll never be able to do this again. Or last summer when we were out west, and after we like told people that we were pregnant, we had so many people say, oh, well, enjoy your trip out there, you're not going to go out there again, or good luck, you know, with this backpacking trip, it won't be a long time till you can do that anymore. And we always kind of thought in the back of our minds, like, no, like we can still. Like, we can just incorporate him into these things and make it a really cool thing for him. And that was, like, our goal and our hope before all this. But, you know, this summer was, like, the testing grounds for that theory, though. Can we still do some of these things? So we've been out now on the road out west for almost 3 weeks, camping with the little guy. And the week before that, we took him on his first camping trip before that. And we've done a lot of hikes and stuff in Michigan and now here in Montana. And, you know, overall it's going really well. And I'd say that I think we are right. Like we can still live the lifestyle that we have been, and we can still be very outdoors focused, and we can still do a lot of these things and travel a lot. But it is definitely different too. I think the big things that have changed is that everything just takes longer. Like I can't prioritize like my goals anymore. It's much more so about like the minimum. Like it's just, okay, let's just get there, or let's just have a little bit of an experience. Let's just test the waters, and if we can at least, if we can hike for half hour, that might be all it is. And if that's all it is, then that's great. We just enjoy it for whatever it was that we got. So, you know, we had on the drive out here. Usually, I like to burn rubber and get out here as fast as I can, drive straight through. But that definitely wasn't happening with a 5.5-month-old in the car seat. So, you know, it took us 3 days, and we took like long, like hour and a half, 2-hour breaks at rest stops and let him play. And, you know, just everything takes a long time with feeding him and changing him and letting him nap and play and all this kind of stuff. So that was an adjustment as far as like traveling. And then same thing like when we're out here, like trying to go for hikes and things like that. Everything just takes longer. So I set much lower expectations for what we're going to do, and lots and lots of breaks. And then I'm just, you know, having to think about different things. You know, before when it came, like if I was going to do some big hike, I was just thinking about, okay, how far can me and Kylie hike? And, you know, what's the elevation going to be? All right, 2,500 feet, 10 miles. All right, let's go do it. Now, obviously, all those things are much different because, you know, you don't want to be too far from the trailhead and then have the baby throw a conniption because he hasn't adjusted to the elevation yet or something like that, or him get sick and be too far away from the car, or the sun get too hot and him be overheating. There's all these new things that I'm trying to learn about now too. So I'm much more aware of things like sun and weather and rain and wind and bugs. all that kind of stuff. So we've had a lot of hikes that like we've started and then had to turn around. So we've done like a lot of like, our longest hike we've done with him was like 7 miles. We've done a lot of like 2 to 3 to 4 mile things with him, a couple hours. But it's been cool. I mean, even though we're not doing anything like quote unquote epic, like stuff I used to think I always want to do, just taking like a little walk down the road with him and like see him get excited about, you know, whatever, a dog running by.
Right.
That is super cool. So it's been awesome. I mean, he's been great. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we've been really lucky with him. He sleeps really well. He's just a happy, chill baby. He really enjoys being outside, it seems like. He just enjoys looking around. He's very observational. He's just constantly scanning, looking at things, taking in the world around him. And then this past weekend, we actually took him on his first tent camping trip. So everything before this has been in the camper, you know. But this weekend, we did a tent camping trip. We actually found a really cool place. There's this road that actually goes up to the top of this kind of this relatively moderate mountain range here in Montana, and you can drive this road up to the top, and you're kind of above tree line, like beautiful, beautiful views. It's national forest, so it's like you can camp anywhere, and it's the kind of place that we would usually hike to, but we're not going to do like a 10-mile backpacking trip with them yet. But this is the kind of thing, like we could drive up there. It was pretty comfortable. We could camp right out of the truck. We could set up the tent and still be like in a really pretty place and feel like we're out there. So it was like a really great opportunity to, you know, still be doing like something that felt like exciting for me and Kylie, but was accessible for him. And he had a blast, and he just kind of hangs out, and he slept in the tent great. We have a setup. That was one of the things we didn't know what tent camping was going to be like, because not only is it myself and Kylie, but we also have our 2 dogs. So we got my big lab and then Kylie's little dog, Cooper. So we had 2 dogs, 2 people, and him. So we bought a bigger tent this spring to accommodate a bigger family. So we bought like a 4-person backpacking tent. And then because like Boone, the lab, is so just, I mean, you know, Andy, he's just not.
I know exactly how he is.
He's not self-aware. Like he's just spinning around and jumping.
He thinks he's the same size as Cooper.
Exactly. And he's definitely not. So one of our worries is always like him stepping on Everett or bumping him and smashing him or something. So we got this little like this little mini kid tent that we actually use for a lot of things. Like if we're hanging out outside, imagine this is like a little, I don't know, like it's a 3-foot long by 1 foot tall mini tent that just pops up like a pop-up line kind of thing. And so when we're outside hanging out, and like if there's too much sun and he needs a little bit of shade, or we want to just set him somewhere while we're cooking or whatever, you can put him in that little thing and he can roll around and play, but he's not gonna, you know, get stepped on by the dog, or same thing in the tent. So we put him in that inside of our tent so that when Booner jumps in there, just run around trying to get settled, he's not gonna step on Everett. So that worked out really good. And then for like a sleeping bag type situation, oh, and let me take a step back. That baby tent, if anyone's curious, it's called the Kidco Peapod. I had some people ask me on Instagram about that. And then we put him in this little like Patagonia fold-down suit that it's, you know, it's like a snowsuit almost, but we use it as like a sleeping bag. We'd seen some other people online that use this for their little babies, taking them backpacking and stuff, and that worked awesome. I mean, he stayed warm. He slept through the night like just perfect. And you know, he heard coyotes howl for the first time, and we heard a wolf howl in the middle of the night, I'm pretty sure.
You did?
Yeah. It was one of those things like me and Kylie, we woke up in the middle of the night, and like we woke up to it, and then you just kind of heard the tail end of it, and then you're like, was that what I think it was? So we both kind of sat up and looked at each other.
We
and
were
we're
just
like,
talking about that all the nights.
Yeah.
Weren't we just talking about, was that you that I was talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
We were talking about all the nights that you'd spent, and I have never heard one either. And you've never heard one. That's cool.
Yeah. And so we actually heard one once before. Last summer I heard one once. Was the first time. And then this time was the second time, and obviously Everett's not gonna remember, but still kinda cool that you can say that on your very first time tent camping.
You can say it, yeah.
Yeah. So that's been really sweet. And then I don't know. I mean, it does pay to have some helpful gear. Like we have had this like baby backpack carrier. It's the Osprey Poco AG is the one we were using, and that's been great for carrying them around all over the place. Don't you have some kind of backpack carrier, Dan, too, that you've used?
Yeah, I have. I don't even know the name of it right now, but it was we bought it at a garage sale.
Oh, nice.
And it's been used for all 3 kids.
Yeah, I feel like having something like that that's comfortable is nice if you're going to do a bunch of hiking with the kiddo. That's been huge for us because he's just been kind of toted around all over the place, and it's comfortable, and it has like a pull-up sunshade, so kind of like a sunroof deal that pulls up over him. My wife is like really paranoid about him getting sunburn because he's like very fair-skinned like her. He's got very light skin tone. So she's always saying he's going to get burned, So having a little sun cover is good. But yeah, I don't know. It's been awesome. It's very different, but it's been so exciting.
It's different, isn't it? You can't explain how it's different to somebody that doesn't have kids. I remember telling you that. Like, it's like when somebody just explains the mountains to you, and you're like, "Yeah, I get it, man, I get it." And the person telling you is going, "Nah, you don't get it." And then the first time you lay your eyes on him, you're like, "Oh, that's what he meant."
Yes.
And kids, it's like that too. Like, it's so cool, and you're telling the story of how cool it was at whatever your kid did, and you can see it in their eyes that the person you're telling, they're just like, I don't want to listen to this, but you don't care that they don't want to listen to it. You're so happy about it, you just keep telling them, you know.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that now. And I always was that guy. I was that guy. I was like, they're talking about their kids again, blah blah blah. But now I totally.
I know you were. I've seen that look in your eyes.
Oh, here goes Andy on his baby rants talking about the kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm on the other side.
And that's one thing that I really.
Now.
That's one thing that I really had to learn to do, like what you said, Mark, was slow down. Anytime I wanted to bring my kids with me, it's like you can't just go out and check a trail camera or go out and glass for deer. You have to make sure there's sippy cups. You have to make sure their shoes are on. You have to make sure they've gone to the bathroom before they get in the truck. You have to make sure there's, if they get hungry, you might need to grab a snack. You might need to go look for your extra pair of binoculars. You might need to, and then by the time you get it ready to go, oh, Dad, I got to go potty. Well, I thought I just asked you to go potty. No, Dad, I didn't have to go, but now I do. Okay. So then you got to go potty again. And it's just like, you can't just hop in, hop out, go. You have to prepare for everything.
That's definitely been my big take home probably from this summer so far with him. It's it's just different.
I think it gets easier though.
Yeah.
Would you say that, Dan? Like you don't expect, like, even though Mark, you said you didn't, your expectations were maybe lowered, but as it goes by, like as time goes by now, like every time you go do something, you're not like ready gung ho, and then, oh shoot, I forgot I gotta pump the brakes here. It's like now I'm kind of tempered. Like I know when we go do.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that I have to do I'm changed. I have changed to expect that it's, I have to be slow.
Yeah, and it's probably worth it, right? You don't mind so much now.
No, I don't mind. Not at all.
Yeah. Speaking of changes you have to make for kids, because my wife and I and my baby all share a 20x10 camper right now out here in Montana, I can't record my podcast in the camper because he's either napping or he's gabbing away, making all sorts of noise. So I'm recording this podcast in the front seat of my truck in the middle of a rainstorm. Can you hear that at all, Dan? Can you hear the rain and thunder?
Yeah, I can hear the rain on top of the car, but I didn't hear any thunder.
Okay. Yeah, so kids always changing things up. But back to the camping thing. Andy, you took your family out for their first Western trip last year, so with a 6 and 8-year-old to Yellowstone and stuff, right? What was that like?
It was awesome, man. It was an awesome experience. I'd never been out to Yellowstone or Grand Teton, so and I kind of didn't want to go without them, and I'd been waiting for ever since they were born, thinking like, well, should we go this year? And then we're like, they're probably not old enough, and we waited until they were this last year, so 8 and 6, I guess, and it was the perfect age to take them because everything they can you can point out and on the side of the road and say, look at that, whatever it is, and they can take it in, and but they're not so young that it's not all about, no, there's no diapers involved or, any of that, which, not to say it wouldn't have been fun, but I think for their sake, they enjoyed it because they were just, got to ride in the back seat. They weren't all strapped into a car seat, and they, read books, and it was an awesome experience, but not just Yellowstone and Grand Teton. I mean, everything that we went through out there. We saw the Badlands and different things like that, and I mean, they're absolutely hooked on it. Like if a week goes by and one of them doesn't say, remember when we were in Yellowstone or when we were in Grand Teton, or, you know, not a week goes by that one of them doesn't bring that up. Or I always will hear them talking to their friend, like the neighbor kids come over and they'll be talking about it. Just, oh, we went to Yellowstone. It was so cool. And so I definitely think that, I mean, another one of those trips is in our future real shortly, I think.
That's awesome. That's what I just can't wait to,
dude.
Once he, recognizes stuff and he right now it's cool that he's in these places, but it's mostly just cool for me and Kylie. But he's just kind of like oblivious. But it'll be really exciting when he actually recognizes what's happening. And I was thinking about this the other day. I still think there might be something like positive for him in having these experiences now.
Oh, absolutely.
If
just the energy that you guys are exuding when you're in those places, I think he benefits from that. I mean, I think wouldn't you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right.
I mean, how happy are you when you're in those places? And I mean, it's not like he's reading your mind or anything like that, nothing weird like that. But I mean, I feel like, there's probably good vibes coming off you guys when you're out there, I would think.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And even if it's like 4 years from now or something, and we're just telling him the stories of this stuff, or he's looking back at the pictures, I feel like that's something like, oh yeah, I was doing that stuff. That was me. I was that kid.
I've
think
been
that's
there.
I've
done that.
Maybe that builds some kind of like identity or confidence or something that, will positively impact him. I hope. So, I don't know. Anything from your trip, taking them camping, like any lessons you learned from that first big family road trip with that age of kids?
Our kids they're awesome, man. I mean, I'm not just trying to brag about my kids, but they don't have electronics. They don't know anything about. I mean, they know how to run an iPad better than I do, or any electronic that you could ever get your hands on. They're better at it than anybody that's our age. But at the same time, like we've never put something in front of them to occupy them. We've taught them, and I think this is going to do them a service in the future for the outdoors, because we've taught them to entertain themselves when there's nothing going on. Figure out something to do. Like if there's nothing going on, they go outside, they play, they take their BB guns out there, or whatever it is they're doing. They're doing it on their own. So that's what what I learned about it. Just let them enjoy it, because if they're staring at a iPad or whatever it is, they're not going to enjoy. They're not going to even remember. It's just going to be another time in the car. And we didn't do that. And we got a lot of books and checked out things. That was something that you kind of recommended, getting books for like Western reading, like type things. I didn't really get anything specific for myself, but we thought about that with them. So we had like books that we'd rented from the library or checked out from the library that we could, that they could read all the way out there, different things. And it was pretty amazing. I think, I can't wait to go do it again. We've been talking about what we're going to do next, but it all takes money. So
yeah, that's the trick. It did seem like you guys had such a cool trip, though. That was fun to see the pictures and follow.
19 days we were out there.
Man, that's awesome. So Dan,
19 days. Pretty wild.
Dan, when's the first big family road trip for you guys out to the mountains going to be?
I think next summer, potentially going to Colorado.
Nice.
So my brother went out there with his son this past summer, and he drove throughout the entire night. So it didn't really like change his son's sleeping pattern. And I think I talked to you a little bit about that. So I think that's what I'm going to try to do is, put the kids in the car at 8:00 at night, drive all the way through the night to Colorado or a stop somewhere, or break the trip down into go to the Omaha Zoo and spend the night, and then get up early the next morning and drive to Colorado. But that's still not going to happen until next summer. So I'm excited though. The logistics are going to be weird, but I'm excited.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And that was something we did do. Like the first day we took off, we started at 2:30 in the morning or something. And so we did have a really good long spell there where he just slept all the way through. And that does help just cut some time, because if it's during the middle of the day, there's gonna be more times when you have to stop. And so the nighttime driving is a key idea for sure. I think we got to wrap this one up here pretty quick, but I want to get one more thing out there, one more talk, and this is something that I'm now having to encounter, and this is something that me and Dan have talked about a lot over the years. But I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on this, Andy, and then maybe Dan, where your latest thoughts are on this. But what about Andy when it comes to balancing, right? Balancing your hunts, balancing your hunting trips with the obligations you have as a father. I know you and me take off for some elk hunting trips. We've done some fishing trips. It seems like that's something you're able to take off for those types of things. And I know you hunt a pretty good amount at home. How do you manage to keep that balance in the right place, though?
Well, I think you've heard the term, what is it, political capital that we say sometimes. You gotta be home when you can be home, and when it's time to be in the woods, you gotta be in the woods. So
yeah.
I try to take care of business when I'm home. So Mama's isn't mad at me when I leave. So I don't know. I you know how Becca is. My wife is super understanding. Like, she doesn't want to hear me tell her every detail about everything that we're going to do, every hunt, every trail we're going to go down. But at the same time, she likes me to go and enjoy those things. So, and I think she sees the kids' enjoyment in it too. And I've not really gotten sucked her into that world so much. She loves kayaking and camping. She camps probably 40 days out of the year without me. The kids, they go all over different state parks and stuff all summer long because she's off in the summer. So it is a balancing act, but at the same time, I mean, she understands that what it is, what it means to me, and how good it is, what it does to you, man. It gets you back to zero when you can go out and do stuff like that. It makes you feel alive. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing I've found is do what you got to do when you can't be hunting and fishing, because it, make their life good when you're here, and then they'll want you to go. They won't be mad when you leave, I guess.
Yeah. I think just something you said there about how it kind of does you good. And I don't know if this is, I've always thought, is this just me trying to come up with a self-serving explanation, or is there truth to this? But I've always thought that these types of things, when we go out and do our own hunts or trips or whatever it might be, while it might take you away from your kids or the family for some period of time, it puts you in a better place. You are more engaged, more there, a better parent, a better husband, a better person with them afterwards, or because that's a part of your life. Do you think that's reasonable?
Oh, I think absolutely true. I mean, it adds a new wrinkle when you go now, because the kids are like I miss my wife when I go for sure, but there's just something about those little boys, man. They just want to watch TV, and you're sitting there and they come in the room and what are you watching, Dad? And they come walking over and climb up on you, and they're sitting there watching TV with you. And, it's like you miss that stuff, but I definitely think that it kind of recenters you, and you get in the grind of just working all the time. And it feels like, if you have other obligations or things on the weekends and stuff, you don't get to, recharge your batteries. But when you go out and do something like that, I feel like it just kind of puts you back to zero, and you can, I definitely think that there's some truth to that.
Is there anything other than, like you said, just kind of racking up the capital in the off season? Is there anything else that you've done to make it, better maybe for the kids or anything like that? Is there anything you've done to just make that work a little bit better for everybody else? Any advice?
Gosh, I can't. I wish I had the silver bullet right here, but I feel like I'm letting you down. I don't know. I feel like you.
Well, there probably isn't.
Smarter than I am.
There probably isn't a silver bullet, but.
No, I think a lot of times, and I kind of reiterate what I said. You got to take care of business when you're here. Do the things that you can't do when you're gone. I mean, as simple and stupid as that sounds, but that's what I do. I can't. If you got a stinking leaky roof, don't go hunting and then wait for that text when you get back into cell service somewhere and there's water dripping. I mean, not that that's happened. It hasn't happened here, but that type of thing. If you got something that's going to manifest when you're gone, you better take care of that, because you're never going to go again if something like that happens, Yeah,
that's a good point.
I guess that would be my best advice. Take care of business when you can take care of business, because when you're out there in the middle of Idaho and you don't get service and you get 72 texts when you get back to town, hey, what do I do in the hot water or whatever, I don't want that. That's my nightmare right there. So I try to prevent all those things from happening.
Yeah. What about you, Dan? Anything new now in this 5th or 6th year now of dealing with this stuff? Is your head anywhere different than it was last time we talked about during last fall?
Give me something good, Dan, because I feel like I didn't have anything good. So give me something I can use.
Here's what I will say, and that is early season hunting has now become a go when my wife is happy type of thing, right? If she's in a bad mood, I probably won't go hunting the first week in October because, if she's having a bad day and she's like, well, I don't care what you do. If she knows that I am going to be gone for a night or 2 nights or gone for even 4 hours to go on a hunt, she has to sit with my kids, and our kids are crazy, right? And they do put stress on people. This is not a joke. This is nothing new, but I have to make sure that I take care of my wife. Like the trip I went out to California with, that was for her, to let her know that I was happy. I'm happy with her, and that, basically these trips that I do, although I don't know, my wife doesn't suffer in silence, if that makes sense. So she will tell you.
She loudly suffers.
Well, yeah, she tells you exactly.
The vocal suffering.
Yeah. She tells you exactly how she feels at all time, which is good, right? She's not the kind of person where you have to say, so what's wrong? And then she says nothing. If I say what's wrong, you better be prepared, because she's going to tell you what's wrong, right? So,
yep. That's my life too, man. I think your wives are similar.
So when I go on my 2-week rut vacation, I'm like, hey, is everything okay? Well, yeah, everything's fine. I mean, she's come to expect that, but it's not going to be fun. I'm going to be here with 3 kids. I'm going to be a single parent. And it's not easy raising 3 kids, because you have basically everything else gets put on hold until I get back. And, stuff doesn't get done, maybe laundry or cleaning, or the kids have to eat hot dogs for, 5 out of 10 days or whatever, because that's just simple. And I don't know. It's one of those things. Here's one thing that I have to say is, I think that once men get married, and I don't know where this is coming from, but once men get married, something is happening in today's world where it's just like, okay, now you are no longer a man. And I think these trips, when for me anyway, when I can go out and, like you said, Andy, get recentered, I think that is needed. I think men need that. They need to be challenged. They need to be out in nature. They need to, basically beat on their chest and be like Tim Taylor, right? I think obviously the definition of a man has changed over the years, but
I think the core definition is still the same. There's a physical part, and I think that concludes it right there, Dan. But
it's gonna get deep, isn't it?
Oh, you know what I mean? Just like, the metrosexual.
I do know what you mean.
We don't have those here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you know what I mean? But I'm just like, I think I come back on something like this. I've been able to vent. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband. Maybe she sees that. Maybe she doesn't. But I feel it, and I just got to make sure that she's happy throughout the rest of the year, so that she can be pissed for the rest of when I am hunting. So it's better to have her only pissed 3 or 4 weeks out of the year, as opposed to months on end. So
that's true. I've been thinking about this a lot. Oh, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, have either one of you ever just been sitting there in your tree stand and nothing's going on? Or maybe, I think this instance, I was ice fishing and I sitting there, nothing's going on. I pick my phone up, my ADD kicks in, and I instantly pull up something, Facebook or Instagram or something, and I look down and I scroll, and this lady posts, my husband went elk hunting in September. Has anybody seen him since? And it was like January 2nd, and I look up, Becca Bradley. Yep, it's time to go home. Halfway through January, I'm like, that's one of those times when you're like, okay, yeah, I think it's time. So, have either of you had that experience yet, where you just social media, you found out that you were a distant father, absent father. Have you ever had that happen yet?
Not
I've had
quite
a
like
couple of
that.
those. I've had a couple of those. One was my wife posted a picture of my truck as I'm backing out to go on my rut vacation, and she's like, "Hello, fall widow. Here I am," or something like that. She said, like, the next 2 weeks I will be a fall widow, and then the other times you're sitting in a tree stand, and then it's bad at home when you just get you set your tree stand up. You climb in, you hang your bow up, you sit down, you take that deep breath, you're hunting, and then bzz, 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 check your text, and it's from your wife, and it says, "When are you coming home?" She knows when you're coming home, but
Yeah, she knows.
all she's saying is that's code for it's crazy as shit here. Please get your ass home.
That's a bad feeling in your stomach when you see that text.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've been thinking about all this a lot. I don't know how it's going to change things for me this year, especially because I've got a lot on the schedule. So I'm trying to figure out if it's shorter trips. Maybe by planning instead of like week-long trips, they're like 4-day long trips, coming back more often like that. So it isn't as long a periods of times being gone, or I don't know. I feel like I've got a lot to learn this year, but you guys have thoroughly scared me in some ways, as you typically do, Dan.
You are. How's this conversation though? Because I know you've had it. Don't try to lie and tell me you haven't, because I know you've had it. When your wife says something to you about the amount of time you've been gone, or you're getting ready to go out again, and then your counter argument is something along the lines with "This is my business now. Like, this is how I make my money now." Right?
Yeah, I don't get to use that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to learn how to get to use that. I know, Mark, you have a legitimate, backing on that statement, but like, I'm sure there comes a point where she's just like, "Yeah, I've heard that too many times. It's not going to count this time."
Yeah, no, we definitely have had that conversation, and so yeah, I do have like the ultimate get out of jail free card for a lot more stuff than a lot of people. So because of that, she is like very understanding of a lot of the stuff I do, but it gets to the point now where there's always one. Usually, it's like the third week of November, where it's been going 2.5 months straight. You had a trip or two in September, and then a lot during October, and then after the big 2 weeks of the rut, usually there finally gets that snapping point. That's where it's like you're not even here. Like, you're not just that you're not physically here, but even when I'm physically here, she'll say that I'm not even mentally there. And so there usually is like a reset where we have to have kind of a talking, and she's like, "All right, I really need some help here on stuff, or you need to be kind of mentally checked back in." But for the most part, the rest of the year, usually she is pretty understanding of the fact that it is business related, and she's really good about it. But I am always trying to, like, I don't want to use that as like, I don't care what your situation is. Like, I don't care how you feel. I don't care how hard it is for you. It's my job, so I'm going to do whatever I want. That's definitely not the tact I take. So even though, yeah, it's my job, I always am trying to find ways to make sure that I can make it as, as doable for her, as non-painful for her. And the thing is that, yes, I am not around as much during the fall, but the benefit of what I do is that I'm present all the time the rest of the year. Like, we spend all day together, every day. Like, I don't have to go to 9 to 5.
She loves that every day.
Yeah, maybe that's a downside.
Every day.
Maybe I need to relook at this theory.
She wants you to take up something like golf or something this summer. You can start golfing.
Get out of the house.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's pros and cons. But I am constantly trying to find ways to make it work for her too. So I'm sure this year there'll be some relearning, some figuring out how to balance things better. And I've always wanted to make sure that I'm carrying my side of the bargain too. I never want to just throw everything on her, like managing the household and the baby and everything. So I'm sure we'll have a new challenge with that this year, but we'll figure it out. We've gotten a lot better. I think for us, a big thing was like communicating about it all. Like, my wife isn't as much like yours,
sure.
Dan. Like, my wife is more so, she'll kind of just hold on to stuff. She won't bring it up until I force the issue. So I've learned to like force the issue early on versus like early on in our relationship. I knew like she wasn't super talkative with me. I could tell that she was irritated about something. I knew it was probably about my hunting, but I just didn't want to deal with it. So I was like, I don't want to get in a fight, or I don't want to get, have this like uncomfortable conversation. So I just let it go. And then we go like a week, and you could just tell there's like this tension underneath things. And that was never good. And it would like lead to like some kind of blow up fight, a month later or something. But now I just nip it in the butt. So I will just force the issue. I'm like, okay, I know that something's bothering you. It's probably X. Is that it? Is that the case? And if so, let's talk about it. And once we've kind of figured out that we need to do that, and that's related to a lot of things in our relationship, but especially with like hunting and balancing, all those kinds of things. Now that we get that stuff out on the table, it's so much better. And then she can be like, okay, I understand you got to be gone for a week for this. I understand you got to be gone for a week for this. But maybe instead of being gone 2 weeks straight, what if you came back for 3 days? Like, that'd be really helpful. Or I've got this thing going on. I really could use some help during that period. And like, once we talk through it that way, we can find a way to make it work a little bit better for both of us. So it's simple, but just communication, I think, helps. So
Absolutely.
that's all I got. I guess we gotta, like I said, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll have to reconvene once we have older children and see if any of this helped us out.
Right.
Any final?
Like kids all hate me now.
Yeah, your advice ruined my
That
life,
one time
Dan.
he watched me gut a deer.
Any
Saw that deer gut one time. That was it.
any final thoughts, Andy? You want to add on this?
No, I don't have a lot. I guess I would say that don't be afraid to not kill huge bucks or not kill as many ducks or do whatever. If your kid wants to go, take them, man. Just take them fishing. Don't catch anything. Just take them with you. If that's what it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Just take them out. And that's where I'm at now. I used to take things like, not that I don't take it serious, but at this point now, what I take serious is any interest they have in going. If they want to go hunting, I will take them. I will put them in that tree stand, and we will sit there and be cold and go home if we have to, or whatever we have to do. That would be my advice. Just take them, man. Whenever you can.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Dan. Anything else?
No, man. Just baby steps. That's what I mean. That's the only thing that I know how to do, and I don't want to ever burn them out, because even going once or twice is better than not going at all. And that's really what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to experiencing all these things you guys are talking about. It was like the scariest thing ever, having a baby, but it has been the coolest thing ever too. And everything, all these new things ahead of us, I'm just looking forward to it so much. So raising an outdoor kid, I think, is probably going to be the coolest outdoor adventure of our lives, right? So
I think so.
I can't ask for anything more. And that's going to do it for us today. So if you haven't yet, I think today is the day for you to subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review on iTunes. It's a surefire way to build up some of that positive karma that you're going to want for hunting season. So be sure to do that. And while you're at it, follow Wired to Hunt on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And finally, thank you all for listening, especially on episodes like this here today, where we take a break from talking big bucks and hunting strategy and instead focus on some of these bigger issues in life. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again, and until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.